Do you struggle with a phobia? We're going to talk all about it and how to take care of it. Stay tuned. That's what's up next. Hi, my name is Natasha Daniels. I'm a therapist and make videos for people with anxiety or OCD. And today I want to talk to you about how to handle a phobia. A lot of us have them. Let's talk about how to get rid of them. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, because I make new videos every Thursday. Okay, so let's talk about a phobia. First of all, what is a phobia? Well, it's normal to have fears. It's normal to be afraid when a bee lands on you, to be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get stung. It's normal to feel a little bit frightened when you're standing on a cliff in the Grand Canyon. These are kind of normal things. It might even be normal to be slightly uncomfortable when you're getting a shot or your blood taken. But a phobia goes way beyond that. A phobia might make you afraid when you're not even in a situation like that. It might make you afraid, maybe there's bees in my house, or I don't even want to go outside because what if there's a bee out there? Or it might make you afraid of heights, like I don't even want to go on top of a little ladder or go up the stairs. It's something that goes way above and beyond what is a normal situation to be frightened about. And unfortunately, phobias can take over your life, right? So regardless of whether you have an anxiety disorder or not, or OCD or not, a phobia is something that can really dominate you. It might make you avoid planes, so you have to take the car everywhere. It might make you avoid shots or blood tests, so you don't do all the medical things that you need to do. It might make you avoid going outside because you're afraid of insects or animals. It might make you not swim because you're afraid of the water. We all have different phobias, and I've heard almost every one of them under the sun as a therapist, and I've had a few myself. But the problem is when we give into phobias, just like when we give into anxiety or OCD, they grow bigger and our avoidance grows. And so if it is a phobia that you need to get over in order to function in life, and most phobias are like that. There are some, like, I have a phobia of sharks. That's okay. Maybe it's a fear of sharks. I don't know if it's a phobia, because if it was a phobia, I wouldn't go into the ocean at all, right? But some phobias, you can say, you know what? I'm okay with this phobia. I'm going to live with this phobia, and that's fine. But most phobias, we can't live with, or we don't want to live with, because it is limiting you. It is making you not be able to do activities. It's not making you able to do things that you want to do, or that you need to do, or that you should do. So you have to first ask yourself, is this phobia limiting me? And most of the time the answer is going to be yes. In some way this is limiting me, and that's not going to go away. I had a phobia of reading out loud, and it started in 8th grade when I had a horrible history teacher who was lazy and would go around the classroom and he'd make everybody read. And because I had social anxiety, I was really nervous that I might mispronounce something, or I might trip on something, or I might lose my breath as I'm reading. And so it would go around, and as soon as it came to me, I'd freak out. And I'd have shortness of breath, I'd start to be having an anxiety attack, and I would read. And of course, I would mispronounce words because I was so anxious about doing it. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, which means you worry about it and then it happens. And so I developed a phobia of reading. And this phobia of reading, you'd think, okay, well, then just don't read out loud. But phobias aren't like that. It dominated me, and so I became uncomfortable when we would be in social gatherings, and for some bizarre reason, it would always be like, let's read this around, let's take turns reading it. So annoying. And so I was in college, and I had a teacher who made us read, and so I had to drop out of her class because I'm like, if there's even a possibility that she's going to call on me to read, I can't handle it. That's a phobia. And eventually I had to work on it because it dominated my thoughts. I thought, will I have to read in this situation? And you'd be surprised how many situations you actually are called on to read. I'm in a grief group for my husband dying. And last night, and this has happened before, we go around in a circle and read an article. How ridiculous is that? If I did not get over my phobia, that would have caused complete panic. So what do? Well, what I'm going to tell you is not rocket science. That's why I spent a majority of this video trying to tell you why it's important to work on it, because that's the number one barrier, is actually getting you and convincing you that it is something to work on. Because with phobias, it's much easier to say, I'll just avoid situations where I have to deal with that. But even with reading out loud, which seems a little bit minor, it started to dominate my life. It worried me. I couldn't really go places without thinking, is this an opportunity where I might have to read out loud? And so it took over. And that's a small phobia. I mean, for those of you that have bigger phobias, which most of you probably do, it's probably taking over big parts of your life. And it's not what you're afraid of, it's how much it dominates your thoughts and your actions. And so like everything else I teach with anxiety or OCD, it's walking towards those fears. It's walking towards those fears one very tiny, small step at a time so you can start to feel better. It is like, when someone's allergic to nuts and they get little shots of peanut or egg, so that they can get desensitized. They can learn how to cope with that fear because your brain is having an overreaction. It says you won't be able to survive this. And so sometimes we have a disproportionate belief that we won't be okay. It'll be like catastrophic and we won't be okay. But most of the time it'll be fine, right? Even in scary situations. So what is small steps that you can do? And that's going to look different, obviously, for each one of you. When I was doing my reading stuff, I started to read out loud to myself at home. I know that sounds really weird, but even reading alone caused me to lose my breath. I would start to get anxious and I'd lose my breath. So I started to read. And I read, complicated things because one of my phobia issues is that I'm going to stumble on a word and people are going to think I'm stupid. That was kind of one of my core fears. So what's your core fear around your phobia? You want to find the core fear around your phobia because you want to target that. So if you're afraid of bees, and I'm using that just because my son's afraid of bees, he was afraid of the poke. And so we worked on the poke. How do you work on a poke? Well, actually, this might sound a little weird, but he got a paper clip and he, made it long. He flattened it out and made it long. And then he'd slightly poke himself. And then he asked me if I can just poke himself. And I said, this little prick is about how it would feel if you got stung by a bee. It hurts for a second and then it's over. And if that's too big for you, then you might start with just a picture of a bee or a picture of videos of bees. You might, do some research and investigate, what bees don't sting and learn about them, what they do. Because the more we know, sometimes, depending on the phobia, the better it is. If you're afraid of water and you're afraid of drowning, then first you might start in your bathtub and then you might build up to a pool or you might dip your feet in. It's a ladder, right? So you're taking one small step at a time. I can give you a million examples, but they're going to be different for each person because everyone has a different phobia. But brainstorm and think, what's the tiniest little thing that I'm okay doing? And as you're making this ladder, or even a menu, it doesn't have to be a ladder. It could be a menu option of I'm going to do this and then this. My daughter had a phobia of blood for a 48-hour period, but it was intense, super intense. It was triggered by something. And we made a menu and we did an emoji of blood. That was actually high. That caused her a lot of stress. Writing the word out, her writing the word out, her seeing some pictures. We got to the point when we started to do the ladder where she was looking at pictures that made me squeamish. She improved that quickly because she was starting to get desensitized and she was starting to prove to her brain, you can survive this. You can be exposed to this and you can survive this. For all of you, it'll be different as far as what that ladder will look like, but start to write down different ideas. Don't get scared and say, oh my gosh, I don't want to write that down because there's no way I will ever do it. I can't tell you how many people in my practice have said, I will never do that. And I said, we're just writing down ideas. You don't have to ever do it. We're just writing down ideas. In fact, that in itself is a good exposure because your brain is thinking about doing it. And so it's a good, method of exposing your brain to that discomfort. So we write them all down. Every single person eventually was able to do the things that we wrote down. It just took small little steps. So get out a pencil and paper, write down, or pen and paper. I don't know why people say pencil. Write down some ideas of the different exposures. If you like the idea of a ladder, then make it a ladder. You can skip though some of the rungs or steps, whatever makes you happy, and then look at it. And once a day, depending on your phobia, it might be a little hard depending on what you have to do one of those things. Now you might do one thing for a very long time. You might say, okay, I'm afraid of insects, and so I'm going to go sit outside for 5 minutes a day. And that might be enough for you for a while. You might sit out there and sit out there and sit out there and sit out there. And then over time you might say, you know what? this is like a 0 on my 1 to 10 stress scale. And so now I'm going to go sit near the grass where I know that there might be bugs. And so I'm not going to go on the grass. I'm going to sit near the grass. And maybe that's like an 8 on my 1 to 10 stress scale. And I do that for a while. I sit by the grass, sit by the grass, sit by the grass, sit by the grass. And then I'm like, you know what? This is okay, right? I can handle the discomfort of seeing some insects around me. I can even handle the discomfort if I got bitten, because I'm learning how to tolerate discomfort, and I'm learning that no matter what happens, I will be okay. And then I might actually sit in the grass. It takes time, and everyone's timeline will look different, and everyone's, actions of what they're going to do will be very different depending on your phobia. But my point for you in this video is don't let your phobia just sit there and grow. Don't let it dominate you. I can't tell you how many people I know who have phobias about things, and they can't do this, and they can't do that, and they can't go there, and they can't do that. And you're like, wow, that's really limiting you. And that's not fair, because you want to live your best life. And phobias, they'll take that away from you. So I hope this motivates you to get started, and I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do. And I'll talk to you again next Thursday. Take care.